This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome, Shalom Aleichem. Today is the 5th day of Av. Today is the Yahrtzeit of Rabbi Glatstein, the Arizal. So it's a day of interest to a lot of people. So let's speak a little bit about the Ari and perhaps the connection to Tisha B'Av. You know, Dvarim Gedolim Einam B'Mikra, great things are never coincidental. It's very interesting that many of the Mekubalim's Yahrtzeit are around this time of the year. So Reb Shamshin Me'ashtapoli, his Yahrtzeit is the 3rd day of Av. The Ramami Pano, Reb Menachem Azaria of Pano, who's one of the great Italian Mekubalim, his Yahrtzeit is on the 4th day of Av. By the way, the Ramami Pano has a little bit of a different tradition of Kabbalah than Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital's tradition of Kabbalah was from the Ari. Actually, the Arizal told Reb Chaim Vital that you're the only one who is allowed to record my teachings and transmit my teachings. So the question is, the Ramami Pano teaches many things that Reb Chaim Vital doesn't teach. So who authorized? It seems like the Ramami Pano's teachings are somewhat unauthorized, because Reb Chaim Vital was given the official approbation from the Ari. You're my continuity, you could give over my teachings, and nobody else is allowed to. The Ramami Pano teaches certain areas of Kabbalah. It's called Ak, Aleph Kuf, Ayin Kuf, Olam Kadmoin. So there's a big question that even Rosh Hashivas deal with. Who authorized the Ramami Pano to give this over? Rav Hutner once wrote a letter. The Ramami Pano, aside from writing on Kabbalah, the Ramami Pano wrote a commentary on the Rif. It happens to be, I was just at the Rif's Kever in Spain, in Luciana in Spain. So the Ramami Pano wrote a commentary on the Rif. Rav Hutner wrote a Haskama to the Ramami Pano's commentary on the Rif. So Rav Hutner deals with this question, like who authorized Ramami Pano to give over from the Ari when the Ari only authorized Rav Chaim Vital? So Rav Hutner says a very important chidush, that before Rav Chaim Vital ever went to learn from the Ari had a student. In other words, before the Arizal gathered the Talmidim in Tzfas, the Ari had one student. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. Rabbi Yisrael Saruk was grandfathered in before Reb Chaim Vital ever sat before the Ari. The Ramami Pano was a student of Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. So in other words, Rabbi Yisrael Saruk was grandfathered in before the Ari said to Reb Chaim Vital, I'm teaching you and you're the only one who's authorized to give over. Anyone who he taught before was grandfathered in. So Rabbi Yisrael Saruk was grandfathered in, and therefore that branch of Kabbalah through Ramami Pano was already grandfathered in. And then after that, whatever the Ari taught after that, that's only Reb Chaim Vital and nobody else is allowed to give over. That's the chiddush of Rav Hutner. Okay, so today is Yahrtzeit of the Ari. The Arizal was born in Reish Tzadi Daled. Now, it's kedai to come just to learn this. What year is Reish Tzadi Daled? So there's an important formula you should know to translate a Jewish date to a secular date. Okay? It's very simple. You add the year 1240. So Reish Tzadi Daled is 294. So 1240 plus 294 is 1534. Okay? It's a very good idea to have. You add 1240 to the Jewish date, you get the secular date. The question is, they once asked the Ari, why don't you write? You know that the Arizal wrote nothing. We don't have anything in writing from the Arizal. The Arizal says it's impossible for him to write. It's not within the Metzias for him to write, because every time he starts to teach, the well springs of wisdom open up so wide that it's like a tornado, it's like a tsunami. So it's impossible for him to confine what he wants to teach to writing. It's just not possible. And he has to seal everything up, and it's very difficult for him to open up one Pesach. Okay, that's what the Ari said. I want to share with you some teachings of the Arizal. First of all, how did the Ari reveal all these secrets? I mean, there are great people before him, there are great people after him, And all of a sudden, in the year 1534, you know that Arizal lived under 40 years old. What, 39 or something like that? Anybody know how long did he teach Reb Chaim Vital? The whole era of the Ari in Tzfas was what?
2 years.
2 years. It's I believe 1 year and 10 months. That's the whole the whole career of the Ari in Tzfas. So where did he get all this information from? So there's an amazing Chida I once saw. Chida is in the Midbar Kedemais. The Chida says a Chida. She says Pshitali. Says it's obvious. Hari hayanitar be'efer para. The Arizal had the ashes of the Paraduma. I think in the Shomron now, I think last week, a Paraduma was born. You know about this? It was in the news. A fully red heifer was born. They're expecting at least 1 million visitors in the Shomron for this red cow.
It was brought in.
It was brought. What? It's in the 5 towns now.
No, it's brought into the Shomron. It's there.
It's brought in.
Yes.
Where was it imported from?
United States.
Oh yeah. All I know is that the drink Red Bull. the owner, the CEO of Red Bull, passed away on Shabbos Parshas Para. So I know his Yahrtzeit. Anyway, so the Chida teaches that there's no question in his mind the ashes of the Paraduma that Arizal had access to. Where did he get it from? Eliyahu Hanavi brought it to him, and through that tremendous Ruach HaKodesh rested on him. Says the Chida, who told this to me? Listen to this lashon. V'hagam ki lo ra'isi kasav remez mizeh. I never saw a remez. It's not like I saw this in a sefer. V'lo shamati. Nobody ever told this to me. Libi oimerli. My heart tells me shaharav hayamalim hadavar helam nimratz l'roiv an b'sanusai. That the Arizal kept this very quiet. That he purified himself from the ashes of the Paraduma. That's very interesting. That's where the Arizal got his kedusha from. By the way, the Chida goes on to say that we never think of this. The Chida is sort of troubled. How is it that in the times of the Gemara they're on such a high level, and we break our head to understand one line in a Tosfos what's like the Iker Nakuda of why we've been downgraded so much. The Chida says it's because we're Tamei Meis. Who even thinks of it doesn't even enter our mind that the fact that we're Tamei Meis has any effect on us, but apparently it does downgrade our ability to understand the Torah, which may be the connection between Paraduma and Zois HaTorah Adam Ki Yamas Ba'ayhal. In other words, there is some kind of spiritual impediment that Tumas Meis poses to us, and the Arizal had access to the ashes of Paraduma. Now, this is a good story and it's a bad story, because you hear the story, okay, it's not relevant. It's not relevant to me. But you have to understand, why was the Arizal Zoiche to have the ashes of the Paraduma? What did he do that he was Zoiche to have the ashes of the Paraduma? So it's very interesting. There's actually a Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Sukkos. Mishnah Berurah is bothered. What did the Arizal do that he was Zoiche to reach such high levels? And the Arizal says, by Hilchos Simchas Torah, that the Madrigals and the Mailos of the Ari came from Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Yeah, it's a Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says the highest levels that the Arizal reached were through Simcha Shel Mitzvah. It's Chassam Sofer writes that when a person does a mitzvah and you do it b'simcha, you get more schar for the simcha that you have doing the mitzvah than even the mitzvah itself. So the Arizal reached very high levels through Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Kaf HaChaim brings, in the name of Reb Chaim Vital in the Shara Kavanos, that the Arizal reached his madrigals by making Birchas HaNehanin. By making Birchas HaNehanin b'kavana, he was able to sift out whatever impurities are in the food, and the Arizal reached very high levels by making Birchas HaNehanin b'kavana. Actually, I just saw a lashon. Can you get on that shelf over there? First shelf, there's a sefer Mara Be'etzba. Chida writes a lashon that during achila a person could either downgrade himself. It's a black sefer, like middle shelf, left bookcase, near the door. The Chida says a lashon that by achila could cause a person the greatest elevation, or vice versa, the greatest downgrade. Not there?
All the way on the right.
Okay, so those are some ideas about the Ari. So it's interesting. How did the Ari reach his Madrigals? Either through Simcha Shel Mitzvah or through Birchas Hanehenen. Okay. So there was a guy who was having rheumatitis in his shoulder. Yeah? He was having rotator's cuff. He couldn't understand what it was. He thought maybe he just pitched a knuckleball, he pitched a curveball. He was having a lot of pain in his shoulder. So he came before the Arizal. And the Arizal says, what's bothering you? He says, I'm having shoulder pain. So Arizal looked him in the face. He says, it's because you're mafsik between Mayim Achroinim and Berchas Hamazon. He said, I'm not mafsik, I don't talk out. No, you're learning Mishnayos. You cannot interrupt between Mayim Achroinim and benching. Many people are makbid on Shir Hamalos, but you cannot say Shir Hamalos between Mayim Achroinim and Berchas Hamazon. First, if you want to say Shir Hamalos, say Shir Hamalos. Then Mayim Achroinim, and then Berchas Hamazon. So the guy said, Ari, how did you know that the reason I'm having shoulder pain is because I'm mafsik by learning Mishnayos between Mayim Achroinim and Berchas Hamazon? He says, the Gemara in Bracha says, Daf Mem Beis, Takeoff Lenatila Bracha, Takeoff. So if you rearrange the word takeoff, you get kasef, you get shoulder. So I figured if you're not doing takeoff right, your shoulder's going to hurt. So that's what we're dealing with. Now, don't try this at home. Don't go and get to a guy today. If you go to a guy today, and he looks you in the eye, and he says, oh, you do this, X, Y, and Z, you got the wrong guy. First of all, if he's taking money, you for sure got the wrong guy. I personally, somebody once schlepped me to somebody, and the guy asked me, I am morally opposed, but somebody once brought me somewhere against my will. The guy asked me, he looks at me, he asked me, the one thing that I do, the one thing that I'm akbid on, he said, are you Zahir in this? Though he asked me, that was the one thing I happened to be very Zahir in. So that's I lost, anyway. But that's what the Arizal had, that capability. Once we're on the topic, Reb Chaim Vital writes that the Ari said that the art of, I think it's called in English, physiognomy, of reading lines in the hand, is lost. The Ari says it's gone. He's the last person who knows it. So that's also another thing. You go to a guy, if he's reading your hand, so then that's another sure way to tell that he's working for the dark side. So anyway, that's what the Arizal says. Okay. The Ari told his Talmidim that he's about to leave the world, and they shouldn't worry and they shouldn't be upset, because if they ever have a problem, he's going to come and explain things to them, either behakitz or bechaloin or in some kind of way. The Ari said, don't worry, I'll be back. So the question is, what did the Arizal mean? So many Sfarim bring from the ethical will of Reb Chaim Filaji. Reb Chaim Filaji says that the Reb Shalom Sharabi, the Rashash, was the Gilgal of the Arizal. And therefore, what the Arizal meant is anything that he doesn't explain, you could look in the Sfarim of the Rashash, and the Rashash will explain. I'll read to you Reb Chaim Filaji. He says, Hine Matzinu Legado b'Torah v'Chasidus u'Mefursam b'Kabbalah harashash asher olav amru. About the Rashash it said, Ki ha'havtacha she'evtiach Rabbeinu Ari le'talmidav sha'amar lahem im tizku avei aleichem pam acheres. What the Arizal meant, that if you're zoichal, come another time, what that means is Balahem Rabbeinu Ari begilgal harashash, that the Arizal came as the Gilgal of Reb Shalom Sharabi. By the way, if you look in the Sefer Chak al Yitzchak of the Spinker Rebbe, he brings this down as well, that Arizal was nisgalgal as Rav Shalom Sharabi. By the way, and who was the Ariya Gilgal of? Isaac's going to say what? Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor. The Bnei Yissaschar brings Betzalel B'tseil kel, b'tzal ben Ur v'chur, he was nisgalgal as the Ari, and the Arizal was nisgalgal as the Rashash. Just in case you wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if you didn't know that. Okay, I want to share with you two more things. The last thing will be on the Maramakoimos, something very important to take with us in our times. I was always wondering, the Chassam Sofer writes in Teiras Moshe that in, I believe, 1838, there was a great earthquake in Sfas that leveled the whole city. Right? And the question is, why did it happen? And the Chassam Sofer, he writes this in Teiras Moshe and in other places, that the reason for this earthquake is it was the jealousy of Yerushalayim. Here it is, since the time of the Ari, everyone went to the city of Tzfas, the Arizal, Reb Chaim Vital, Rabbi Shakor Devero, Rabbi Moshe Alshech, Reb Shlomo Al-Kabitz, the Sefer Charedim, who was Reb Eliezer Azkiri. They all go to Tzfas. And even the students of the Chassam Sofer himself, the Chassam Sofer had a student, Rav Amram, he writes about this in his Tshuva. And Rav Amram lands in Akko. And Rav Amram says to the Chassam Sofer, should I go to Tzfas? Should I go to Tzfas? And the Chassam Sofer says, you have to give a person the answer they're looking for. I could tell he wanted to go to Tzfas. I knew he didn't want to go to Yerushalayim. Maybe he won't even listen to me if I would tell him to go to Yerushalayim. So I told him, Gezont hate, go to Tzfas. But he didn't ask the question right. He didn't ask, Rebbe, I'm unbiased over here. What should I do? A lot of times people go to a Rav and they get answer A, and they go around and say, the Rav told me I could do it. No. The way you asked the question, you could do it because you didn't want to hear the real answer. You could have two people, they ask the same shaila, they get different answers. It depends how you ask it. People say, it's mutter to do this. How do you know? Rabbi so-and-so said. Did you ask him? No, I overheard him tell someone else. That's very good. He told someone else that he's allowed to. It doesn't mean he told you you're allowed to. Anyway, so I was always wondering, why didn't the Arizal go to Yerushalayim? So I thought it was for practical reasons. I don't think Jews were allowed to live in Yerushalayim during that time, in the 16th century. Last night I found in the Shemesh Shmuel, he brings a Parsha Shlach. He says, Isa B'Svarim, we find in the books, Shaharizal Bikesh Leilech Yerushalayim. The Arizal wanted to go to Yerushalayim. V'amar loy samach mem al tavor bi. The samach mem says, don't challenge me. You don't want to challenge me on this one. I'll kill you. Pen bacher ve'itzeg l'krasecha. V'nimna v'loy halach. And therefore the Arizal didn't go. So says the Shemesh Shmuel, what's the pshat? He says Yerushalayim is like the pnimius of a pri. It's like the innards, the inside of a fruit. And in the Golos, the Samach Mem encircles Yerushalayim like a shell. And you can't go there until you bypass him. And if the Arizal would have gone there, Haya Machniyai. Sounds like the Arizal would have been able to destroy the Samach Mem. For whatever reason, the Arizal was not allowed to go to Yerushalayim. By the way, you know that the Vilna Gaon also tried to go to Eretz Yisrael, and he set out. If you look in the Hakdama, the Bir HaGra, the children of the Gra say that Min Hashamayim lo hinichu. They didn't allow the Gra to go to Eretz Yisrael. Heaven didn't let. By the way, the Baal Shem Tov tried to go to Eretz Yisrael. He traveled to Eretz Yisrael from the Ukraine via Turkey. He stopped off at the kever of the Smichas Chachamim, Rav Naftali Katz, and Rav Naftali Katz said, "Don't go," and then he went back. That's why many Hasidim they go to Turkey to the kever of Rav Naftali Katz, because this makom is a pivotal makom in Chasidus. Because if not for him, he would have gone to Eretz Yisrael. Maybe there wouldn't have been Chasidus. So they value this kever very much. There was some kind of communication between Rav Naftali Katz and the Baal Shem Tov. The bottom line is, if you could make it to Israel today, that's a big deal. Because they're very big people, we're not allowed to go there. The Ari could not make it to Yerushalayim. They didn't allow the Arizal to go to Yerushalayim. They didn't let the Vilna go into Eretz Yisrael. The Chafetz Chaim as well was on his way to Eretz Yisrael. He didn't just make plans, he was on his way to Eretz Yisrael. The Netziv, when Volozhin closed down, the Netziv traveled from Volozhin. He was going to Eretz Yisrael. Where did he stop off? Warsaw. He died in Warsaw suddenly. I think he had a stroke. He's buried next to Reb Chaim in Warsaw. So if you could make it to Eretz Yisrael today, this is it's unbelievable. They say this joke about these. Without getting into detail about some people that go to Eretz Yisrael, they're so inspired. It's so amazing to be in the land, walking in the footsteps of Moshe Rabbeinu in the Holy Land. Obviously it's a joke because Moshe Rabbeinu never made it there, right? But you see that it's a very big zchus to be able to make it to Eretz Yisrael. So I want to bring out two nekudos. Number one, the Chassam Sofer says the reason for the earthquake of 1838 was the jealousy of Yerushalayim. Everyone was paying attention to Tzfas, and Yerushalayim was like a jealous co-wife, like a tzara. Yerushalayim said, why don't you pay attention to me? Why are you giving so much attention to Tzfas? Jerusalem leveled the city of Tzfas. So from here we see a very important principle. Yerushalayim is a living entity. She wants you. She wants you. She's saying, when are you coming back? When are you going to visit me? When are you going to move here? Yerushalayim, it's not just like a static place. It's not a dead place. It's not dirt. It's a living entity. She's jealous. She has feelings. She has emotions. Yerushalayim has emotions. Okay, let's end off with one statement of Reb Chaim Vital. This is from Rabbi Vadia Yosef, wrote a parish on Pirkei Avos. It's called Anaf Eitz Avos. And he quotes in his introduction a comment of the Arizal Nashar HaGolgolim. Take a look. You have the sheet on page Hey. This is the Sefer Anaf Eitz Avos of Rabbi Vadia Yosef. By the way, so I want to give you the background of this comment. The Arizal would constantly tell Reb Chaim Vital, you don't understand how great you are. You don't understand the sanctity of your neshama. You don't understand how elevated you are. So Reb Chaim Vital says, oh, come on, what are you talking about? I'm elevated. I don't even come close to the earlier generations. The Arizal say, yeah, you're right. You're nothing. But you're even greater than the Tanoim. So Reb Chaim Vital tells, how could I be greater than the Tanoim? So here's the line. The Ari told Reb Chaim Vital, Maaseh katan ma'oid be'esakat Torah v'hamitzvos b'doiros elu. One small act of learning Torah and performing mitzvahs in these generations, shakol keneged kama mitzvos gedoyloi shebedoros shalfanenu, is the equivalency of many great deeds of the earlier generations. One blat Gemara today is maybe in the times of the Rashba like an entire Masechta. A few lines of Gemara today was like learning who knows how much in earlier generations. Why, says Arizal? Ki bedoirois ha'ela hasitra achra goiveres ma'oid. Because in our generation, the forces of impurity are out of control. Ad la'in kates. V'lachein ha'me'at yechashev laharbe ma'oid. A little bit is very valuable. Isn't that a beautiful idea? Now let's just imagine for a moment, what exactly is Ari saying that in his times, the forces of impurity are out of control? Like, what exactly was going on in Tzfas? What exactly is this big Yetzer Hara in Tzfas? Just imagine the Yetzer Hara. There are no smartphones. There's no politics. There's no technology. I mean, the tznius was probably pretty good. And yet, relative to earlier generations, the Sitra Achra was so powerful that a small act in the time of the Arizal was greater than the greatest mitzvahs of earlier generations. He means even in times of Tanoim. So I want to know, what do you think the Arizal would say in 2023? If the forces of impurity were out of control in 500 years ago, what would the Arizal say if a person pulls himself away from the temptations of the times and is able to say, you know what, today, I'm off today, I'm going to spend a half hour, I'm going to spend 20 minutes, I'm going to come to shul early, I'm going to stay late, I'm going to learn a few Mishnayos, I'm going to learn an Amud of Gemara, I'm going to learn a few minutes of Musar. What would the Arizal say? Maybe he would say it's greater than an action of a Navi, I don't know. I once saw the same idea in the writings of Rabbi Rucham Levavitz. He says, we don't like to say this, but it could be that someone who studies a Rishon, because of the temptations of the time, he may even be greater in the eyes of Hashem than the words of the Rishon that he's learning. Rabbi Rucham says we don't like to talk about it too much, because maybe we're going to become arrogant, or maybe, we're going to take this as a cop-out. Yeah, I'll learn one word. I'm going to learn one word today. And that's greater than everything that, that this Rishon ever did in his whole life. So, you could take it to the extreme. But if the Arizal will tell Reb Chaim Vital that a small deed in the 16th century was greater than many great masim in earlier generations, then could you imagine how valuable every single thing that we do in our times is? And that's a great encouragement. So Rabbi Ovadia Yosef gave the following mashal. The mashal is a princess. She's in the palace, and a guy wants to get audience with the princess. So he figures, I'll bring the princess a piece of steak, a slice of pizza. So he goes into the palace. He says, "What you want a piece of pizza? Here's some pizza with parve pepperoni." And the princess says, "Are you kidding me? You call this food? I have the finest chefs and cooks here in the palace. This is dog food compared to what they feed me here in the palace. What are you offering? Get this out of here. It's disgusting. What do you mean? You bought this 2 hours ago. It's already cold. I don't eat food like that. I have personal chefs. They bring me the food like, the steaks that are sizzling on the plate. Get this, get lost. Hey, she calls the dog over, and the royal dog, eats the food. But then there's a rebellion in the palace. And the princess is in captivity, and she's in a dungeon, she's in a pit, and she's wallowing in the pit, and she's languishing in the pit, and she has nothing to eat, and she's starving, and she's dehydrated, and a guy comes and brings her a measly peanut butter and jelly sandwich. When the princess is released, she rewards this person very handsomely. Why? Because the princess is in captivity, and she doesn't have any of her treats, and she doesn't have any of her delicacies and her luxuries, and she's languishing, and whatever is brought to her is unbelievable. Says Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, when the Beis Hamikdash stood and God was in his palace, if you wanted to find favor in the eyes of Hashem, boy, did you need to do an amazing mitzvah. But in our measly times, Shechina begalusa, the Shechina is in exile, and kiviyachol va'ani b'soich hagoyla, Rebbeinu Shalom's in captivity. Any little mitzvah that a Jew does today is so precious in the eyes of Hashem. Any limud haTorah, any tefillah b'kavana, any act of zehirus and kedusha. When a person is faced with a temptation and they say, you know what, I'm going to look away. That is so precious in the eyes of Hashem, much greater than the greatest carbon in the times of Beis Hamikdash stood. So these are a few teachings of the Ari. We think about the Ari, you think, all kinds of mysticism, but some of these ideas are so basic. Whether it's the importance of Birchas HaNehenin B'Kavana, Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and recognizing that every small mitzvah we do is valuable in the eyes of Hashem. So we should be Zoicha on this day, Hey Av, the Neshama of the Arizal should have an Aliyah, and should be a Melech Yosher for all of Klal Yisrael. Ad Bias Gal Tzedek. Shtaya. Reb Chanan ben Kasher ben Ratzak Baruch Hu. Zakos es Yisrael Fika Achir B'Lam Tar Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chafetz Man Tzedkai Yadgil Torah V'Yadir.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.